The first transcontinental long-distance rally by automobile started in Beijing 1907. What was originally intended to be a demonstration of superiority over horses, and in times of nationalism also of the superiority of the French automobile technique, soon turned into a tough race that was carried out with all kinds of devious tricks. On January 31st, 1907, the daily newspaper Le Matin put out the following call, which attracted a lot of attention. Who would like to travel from Paris to Beijing this summer? By car. Initially, this headline may have only caused some curious head shaking. It was, after all, only 21 years since Carl Benz invented the three-wheeled patent automobile. The first car race from Paris to Rouen took place only 13 years before, and only 15 of the 21 participants arrived at their destination, 9 of which drove vehicles with Daimler-licensed Panhard Levasseur engines and one 3-horsepower Benz vis-a-vis. And now they wanted to drive from Paris to Beijing 100 times the distance? But the initiators at El Matin were serious. They wanted to prove the car's technical superiority over the horse, and their idea did hit the era's spirit of adventure and advancement. They called it the Raid Race, and after only a month, 62 drivers and mechanics had signed up. However, the closer they got to their shipping date to China, due to whether the race had been reversed, the more people lost their courage and ambition, and in the end, only 11 adventurers and 5 vehicles remained, who would start their epic journey in Beijing on June 10, 1907. Count Scipione Borghese was there with his Italian 40-horsepower Itola, while Charles Godard, accompanied by a Le Matin reporter, drove a Dutch 15-horsepower Spiker. 2 10-horsepower de Dion-Bouton automobiles were driven by 2 Frenchmen, Collignon and Cormier, and another Frenchman named Auguste Pont started with his 6 PS Contal 3-wheeler. Loaded with provisions, spare parts, tools, and equipment for emergencies, they were ready to start their adventure on a Monday morning, June 10, 1907. 15,000 kilometers lay ahead of them, as well as numerous dangerous challenges that would be unimaginable by today's standards. The beginning of an adventure. The challenges started immediately with the first leg of the race towards the seemingly insurmountable terraces of the Mongolian high plains. There were no marked roads, and the drivers had to find their own way, often only with the help of many hands, across deserted bridges without slip roads, narrow and almost impossible to navigate ravines, as well as muddy and slippery roads up and down the mountains. At the planned stopovers, the automobile pioneers were met by bamboo carriers, horsemen and farmers with ox carts, who would all assist them in places where cars would normally not have been able to pass through, so that they wouldn't have to give up. The 3-wheel Contal faced particular difficulties because of its single-wheel drive, lightweight and unfavorable weight distribution due to its loads. Pons and Foucault were forced into an early end of their mission by an empty gas tank in the Gobi Desert. The 2 Frenchmen were close to dying of thirst when nomads saved them after 1.5 days. The raid becomes a race. The adventure tour quickly turned into a race. Count Scipione Borghese, who was in the lead, decided to drive his Atala around Lake Baikal, instead of taking the ferry which had been approved by the raid committee due to the unknown terrain around the lake. On June 28th, he left the Misawaya harbor for the road that no longer existed, as over time it had become blocked by fallen down trees and overgrown vegetation. Fragile and never-used bridges often collapsed after the Atala had made its way across them. After one of those collapses almost meant the end of the race for Borghese, he decided to take advantage of a newly constructed railway bridge and hobbled his 40-horsepower Itala over the train tracks across the river Mishika. With subsequent permission from the Siberian general governor, he continued his journey on the train tracks and arrived swiftly in Irkutsk. Two days later, the French arrived in their de Dion-Bouton and Godard in his Spiker, also by way of the train tracks, as the ferry at Lake Baikal had never showed up. Soon after his arrival, Godard was set back by technical problems. The magnetic ignition was defect, and there was a leak in the rear axle, which in itself was also terribly unsuitable for the upcoming roads due to its short transmission span. In Sheremetyevo, just outside of Irkutsk, all seemed to be over. But then Godard hatched a daredevil plan. Although the Dutch Spiker mechanic Bruno Stephan was already on his way to meet and help him, Godard put the car on the train and rode the 1,350 kilometers to Tomsk, where the excellent Russian Technical Academy was located, with the intention of resuming the tour in Sheremetyevo after the car got fixed. The Count's triumphant journey. In the meantime, there was no stopping Count Borghese, whose significant head start was mostly attributable to the superior performance of his car and the daily maintenance by his mechanic Ettore Guizzardi. On Wednesday, July 27, 1907, Borghese and his team arrived in Moscow surrounded by great public attention. His advance was so major that he could take his time to rest and to attend the various functions and dinners that had been organized in his honor. He was able to regain his strength and even to respond to requests from his friends and sponsors, as well as taking a detour to the Russian capital of St. Petersburg to meet with the Beijing-Paris Committee at its headquarters. 62 days after the start in Beijing, he finally arrived in Paris, where he was greeted with the same gray and rainy weather, but also great enthusiasm and buoyant festivities. The successful Atala drove into Paris accompanied by the tunes of the Triumphal March from Ada, played by a brass band atop an open-air bus that led the parade. Excited crows lined the streets and guards had to keep them back so that the Atala could reach the VIP stand in front of the Alimatan offices. The remaining participants, in the meantime, were struggling with every kilometer in Russia. Later, they agreed that the worst section was the 400-kilometer stretch between Kazan and Nizhny Novgorod. The roads had been washed away amidst non-stop rain, and on the first day of this leg, they drove a mere 38 kilometers. The condition of the roads improved west of Moscow, and the speedier Spiker was commissioned to drive ahead and secure the supply of gasoline at the local drugstores. It is a testimony to Godard's reputable fine character that he did not use his car's better performance to simply up and run off ahead of everyone else, including Borghese in the desert sometime earlier. An adventurous ending. Nonetheless, the French newspaper Le Matin watched the Dutch Spikers advance with great concern. The original purpose of raid, the promotion of the French auto industry, had already been compromised by handing over the trophy to an Italian. To limit further damage, the managing director of Le Matin ordered the arrest of Godard at the French border on the pretense of some pre-race irregularities. But Spiker boss Jacobus Spieker was prepared for this and had made sure that one of his employees was available to drive the last leg of the journey. On August 30th, 1907, almost 3 weeks after Count Borghese, the two de Dion-Bouton and the Skyper arrived in Paris. Georges Cormier, Victor Collignon and their teams were met by the same enthusiasm that had previously greeted the victor, because in the end, they were all winners of the first long-distance race in automobile history.